Welcome back. Welcome back. It's so good to see you. We've got a few speakers left for you in our summit series, and we're going to speak to Alex Freytag in a moment. Like I said, Alex has written a book called Profit Works, and his business Profit Works specializes in helping businesses develop self-funding incentive programs that influence behavior. Alex is also going to touch on leadership and the importance of that in culture. So welcome to our interview with Alex Freytag. So welcome everybody. I'd love to introduce you to our speaker, Alex Freytag. Alex is the founder of Profit Works and the author of the book Profit Works. He is an engagement and leadership specialist, and it's going to be a fantastic discussion today on leadership, culture, and how we can use incentive schemes to help our engagement and drive the profit for our business. So welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Carolyn. Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So Alex, I'd love you to just tell the audience how you moved into developing this system of business that you are in Profit Works, and talk about a little bit about the lead. But firstly, how did you get in this aspect and focus?
Happy to share that. Well, I grew up actually in a very entrepreneurial household, and I had a t-shirt business in high school. I printed some James Dean t-shirts and sold them to my friends and other schools, and it was kind of a fun little adventure. And then my first real entrepreneurial sort of step was to start Profit Works in 1996. It was 27 years ago, and my brother and I had started it together, and it's really a training company to teach employees to think and act like owners. And what we realize is that in most organizations, the workforce has an unrealistic belief of what they think profits are at the bottom line, and that has a lot of sort of unfortunate consequences. We found when we surveyed employees that most employees think profit was about almost half of revenues. I think you might call it turnover, and certainly not the case. And when they find out that it's much less than that, they are actually motivated to try to figure out how to improve profitability. And so we wanted to help employees think and act like owners. And so it was through training and business sort of literacy content that we started to help them see the business in a new light, or with a new set of eyes. And they started to make improvements in the business, not only for eliminating a lot of headaches on their ends, but also job security and helping the company grow. And it led to increased and incremental profit improvements that led us down a path of really understanding, well, how do we create an incentive plan around this increased profitability that the employees can now share in on the upside, because they've actually earned the money versus it being sort of a bonus. Yeah. And so over a period of years, working with hundreds of companies, helping them do this, mostly in the United States, but some in Australia as well, and over in the UK, really helping the employees start to see a bigger picture. And so that was how we got started in it, and that was how I was introduced to EOS as well, which was in maybe about 12 years ago.
Okay. So for a business for you to go in and talk about profit, and that was the staff, that takes a bit of courage or a lot of communication from the leadership team to enable you to provide that understanding to the staff. So how important is it for us to get our leaders in the right direction with a clear vision, and what are some of the steps that we can do to help that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think a lot of times what I've found is that because somebody's in a leadership position, we often just assume that they understand how business works and how it makes money. And it's an erroneous assumption, because a lot of us haven't been through formal education around this. And so there's a little bit of fear that, gosh, am I faking it here as a leader? I don't understand, what gross profit is or what net income is or what, all these financial terminologies. So we like to help the leadership team initially understand sort of the basic financial picture of the organization so that they can then own the cascading of that information further into the organization. And they can become teachers of the information and help coach and train the folks who report up through them to become more literate around efficiencies and missed opportunities and so forth that can help them drive improve profitability. So the leadership side of it's really important, and it really starts there. What I found is over the years is when I first started doing ProfitWorks is I hadn't really confirmed that the leadership team was 100% on the same page with the vision or with core values or who they are or where they're going, what their 10-year target is or 3-year picture, their whole strategic plan. And so I found that when I encountered EOS, when EOS comes first as an operating system, a way of doing business, the entrepreneurial operating system, it gets the leadership team really synchronized and in agreement on who we are, where we're going, how we're going to get there. And that becomes a fantastic foundation for those leaders to build upon that with increasing the amount of information they share with the organization about how the company makes money, how precious profit is, the difference between profit and cash flow. Those are two different things. And they become more confident in being able to teach this and creating a culture of employees who really think and act like owners, which is just so much fun.
Yeah, I think a big thing when you're talking about discussing how the business is going, there's a lot of trust and a lot of especially in the staff, because most owners will think, well, I don't want to disclose how much business is earning to the people that are working for me, because they in their own minds will have a thought process around how that information might be used or linked to the competition or other things. How do the leadership team overcome some of that fear? Because sometimes you sort of think, I don't want my competitors to know where I'm at or what I'm doing, and there's always that little bit of tension. How do we overcome that fear?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's very common. And what I would encourage a business owner to do, especially if you're someone who really hasn't shared a lot of information historically with even your leadership team, but let alone with the rest of your organization, is to really sit down and think, what am I afraid of? Like, what is my biggest fear? Because often it can be that my competitors are going to get a hold of this. But as you and I both know, competitors have the same limitations and opportunities as you do. And there's a lot of industry specific information that's common among all of your competitors. For them, knowing your information is very different for them to be able to duplicate exactly how you create profitability. So they won't know your secret sauce just by knowing your numbers. But that's actually not the first fear that most business owners have around sharing financial information, is leaking out. It's more, when I should say that if there is something that if it leaked out, it would hurt you, please don't share that. That there is confidential information. I look at transparency of financial information on spectrum from completely closed book to what I call radical transparency. And there's sort of you have to find your spot in there. Where is your comfort level with sharing information? And people live all along that continuum. And what I found is that folks that are a little bit more open book tend to have higher levels of performance. And so the biggest fear that most say when I say, we're talking about sharing information with folks, is they say, if I share this information with my employees, they're going to want more money. And what I found is ironic, because most employees think, again, you're making huge amounts, wheelbarrows full of profit, and they have the story in their head that is wrong usually. And so you can either live with the story that they've made up in their head, or you can put the story that is true in their head. And once they realize you're not making 50% profit, it's more like 5 or 10, they are not asking for more money. They're saying, how do we make that higher? Because there's job security elements to it, and there's investments in equipment and new business lines and acquisitions and other types of benefits to having some profitability for employees to move up in the organization and create more leaders in the organization, as well as perhaps participate in a self-funded incentive plan too. So that's usually the common one, is that the employees are going to misinterpret it, but that's why, because it has to become more of a philosophy of transparency in the business. You can't do it once and expect everybody to kind of have change behavior. It takes repetitive sort of 7 times for them to hear it for the first time, kind of thing.
So it's a very deliberate thing for us when we're talking about leadership and culture. And
Yes.
I guess probably the first step, as you were talking to before, is that clarity of vision and understanding that whole leadership team. Where do we want to go? How do we want to get there? And what or who do we want to be? So how do we then look at that, perhaps as from a culture perspective? You know, we all have a culture, whether we believe it or not, and it's usually a reflection of the leadership style or the leadership team.
Yes.
If we want to make a deliberate change or try to drive something that's different to what we were, how, as a team or a leadership team, do we go about then looking at our current culture and perhaps shifting it to a culture that we're really looking forward to?
That's a great question. It is a long-term journey, right? For that change management to occur, number one, it has to start with the leadership team. So people have to be all in on the change at the top of the organization, because to the degree, and sometimes there's fence sitters in there that, well, they're kind of skeptical at first, but once they start to see the measurable, and sometimes the measurable changes can be in the first 30, 60 days, you start to see an increase in accountability. You start to see a movement in the numbers in the right direction. And so those fence sitters can jump in and say, this is working. This is really cool. And so when the leadership team is on board and they have a simple set of tools to help enable the change to take place throughout the organization, that's where you want to start. As goes the leadership team, so goes the rest of the organization. And so from a ProfitWorks standpoint, when we're talking about employee engagement, and we're talking about enrolling employees really in thinking and acting like owners, I feel like it has to start at the leadership team level. And that's my experience. And it's got to be looked at as a marathon, you know, a very long journey of cultural shifting, almost like a glacier. It's moving very, very slowly. But if you look back a year later, you're like, wow, we are a different organization. A couple of examples that I've seen my clients use. One is when they have a great solid set of core values, like I have back here on my wall, our core values, and we hire, fire, review, reward, and recognize around core values. Rewarding and recognizing around core values is incredibly powerful because you're telling stories about people in your organization who have really lived and breathed and gone above and beyond on some of these core values, and it reinforces them and strengthens them in a big way. So leadership teams really have to have just a handful of rules like these 5 here. There's 5 rules in our organization. Repeat them often and walk the talk. They really have to live and breathe those. And they are the message. The leaders are the message. And that's really where it starts. And then that change can happen.
It's about also being that consistency and like you said, living and breathing. This is our bottom line, and this is where we are. And when leaders start modeling the behavior, it builds a degree of trust, and people know what to expect. So your staff know what to expect from you if you're living by those core values, and it makes it much, I think, much more pleasant. You talked about staff engagement and how that vision can help engage the staff. And we know that probably more than 75% of most staff aren't engaged in business or in the business and the well-being. So we've got all of this latent talent and latent resource sitting there. You were through ProfitWorks, you're talking about, you know, how do we get these people engaged? How do we get more than the 25% or the 1 in 5 turning up and actually participating and enjoying the business and the job that they're in?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why I feel, and my experience is that culture is a competitive advantage, because when you're not in that sort of normal boat of 75% disengaged, if you're the company, or a really best in class type of organization, a company of excellence, you're going to attract A players. You're going to attract excellent employee candidates.
Yeah.
And because people realize that you don't tolerate underperformance, or sort of a violation of, perhaps guiding principles in the organization or core values. And so it really is a mechanism for becoming a unique organization that that attracts and retains star players, and folks who are core values aligned and really love doing their jobs and they're great at it.
Yeah.
And so it's really important that the leadership team knows who they are and where they're going in a very simple way, and can express that to candidates that are looking at joining the organization. And then when those folks come in and they realize, wow, this organization is really special, it's different, they start to operate with all the arrows kind of pointing in the same direction, and the business moves much faster, and they can tackle issues that come up, like processes that are not documented. They can get those documented and get people following those, eliminate a lot of headaches and any communication issues, drop balls, those kinds of things that are happening in the organization. And it makes you a very unique and different organization from the standpoint of performance, which is great. And so culture kind of trumps that strategy, which is great.
So we were talking earlier about, ProfitWorks and introducing incentive schemes. And I know some of the biggest fears that people have is, how am I going to pay for an incentive scheme if we're coming out of COVID, and a lot of businesses are in survival mode rather than thinking about how am I going to thrive. So instead of surviving, we're trying to move people into this thriving mode.
Yes.
And you've had recessionary pressures on us as well.
Right.
So how, as a business, if we were looking at incentivizing staff or to help our engagement, fund that sort of program, when a lot of us are just saying, well, I'm just here surviving today.
Right. Yeah. In our experience, and again, this is over 27 years of experimenting with different design elements, and we've found that in order to protect the company first, because that's the score at the end of the game, is the company's got to exist, is we found that a profit trigger, or a threshold, a minimum threshold of profitability, has to be established before we can consider the incentive plan. And I do, Caroline, use the term incentive versus bonus, because a bonus is like a gift that becomes entitlement mentality. And what we're trying to create is earning mentality and earned compensation. So when you set the trigger or the threshold, you need to set it at a level. The book describes this, but that number one accounts for taxes, and certainly accounts for return on investment to the folks taking all the risk, because all returns come from profit. And then capital investment or reinvestment back in the business, and then servicing any debt that they might have. So those conversations to establish that trigger can take, a little bit of spreadsheet analysis and so forth, but you figure out what is that threshold, and then X%, and we have, again, using models and so forth, try to figure out what percent over that threshold should go into the profit incentive pool. And then we want to teach the employees how to find the money to fund the plan, so that they're actively participating in funding their own incentive plan versus it being a gift from the leadership team or the owner. And so in that way, it becomes a number one, a very simple plan, simple in design, which means it's simple to describe to somebody without them kind of losing you and being confused. When people are confused, the trust goes down. So keeping it really simple, like one number, profitability, the bottom line is the score at the end of the game, and then make it self-funded, which means it's not an expense. It actually pays for itself through its changed behavior. So our definition of the ideal incentive plan is that it shapes employee behavior. It manages that human energy and directs it toward improving the financial performance of the company. And in order to do that, we have to help the employees see the business from an owner's perspective and see, like, about inefficiencies and waste and errors and rework and those types of things, that they can say, oh my gosh, that's money falling through the cracks. If we seal that crack up, we're actually putting more dollars in the, not only in the bottom line, but also perhaps in our incentive pool. So it's a really sort of fun engagement way to do it, and you can also gamify it as well, with visual elements and posters and scorecards and things like that too.
Yeah. So by getting your staff to understand how the business works and understand what they might have to do to help that, it's really creating that total buy-in to, I own my job, or I'm really valued and an important part of this organization, and how we're moving those sorts of things forward.
Yes.
Can you perhaps give us chat through, I know you've worked through with hundreds of companies, how ProfitWorks has, or the incentive scheme and the work that you've done has shifted a business from perhaps one that was maybe not struggling, but not doing so well, to an example of where they've been able to self-fund an incentive scheme and got that culture change happening.
Absolutely.
Thriving.
Yeah, and there are several stories that I have or can tell. A couple of my favorites, in some of these organizations were literally losing money, and had sort of negative cash flow at the time they start to implement this, because so they can be sort of back against the ropes and willing to try whatever they need to do to try to turn it around. And there's certainly a lot of incentive for the employees to become involved in that, because it's primarily job security, let alone an incentive. But from a pest management company to an office furniture distributor to a medical supply distributor, there are wonderful stories around the employees brainstorming on, we call it a leaky pail exercise, but we say, well, we're going to have this incentive plan here, and in order to fund the incentive plan, we need to find the money that's kind of fallen through the cracks. In addition, we need to look at missed opportunities, ideas, things that'll actually help the company grow. Because we want the employees thinking about growth as well as cost containment, and increasing operational efficiencies. And so focusing on measurables in the organization, might be in the warehouse if it's a medical supply distribution company, where they're looking at reducing returns. They're looking at increasing web sales, trying to minimize customer attrition or the customers leaving, and increasing vendor sponsorships of their catalog, and upselling customers and so forth. So those measurables can be kind of identified, put on a scorecard, and discuss with the employees ideas, and they participate in sharing the ideas of ways to move those numbers in the right way over a pretty short period of time, sometimes just one quarter. And one organization I recall had about a $250,000, that's US dollars, improvement in 3 quarters in the organization. And so it just major shifts in profitability. And it creates not only some fun, because they gamified a few of the improvements and had little parties and things like that when the numbers move, but they also were funding their incentive plan as well. So it became this earned compensation. So that was really powerful to watch and see in action.
So how do you see, you talk about different organizations, and I know that a lot of organizations have their own little competitions within departments. How would you use culture and these sorts of programs to drive better interaction and better communication between departments? Because sometimes, I've worked in manufacturing, you'd have a sales will want something to satisfy a customer, and they put something onto production, and then you've got that tension, and then you've also got tension with distribution at the other end. And sometimes it just seems everybody's working against each other. How can we use our culture and perhaps these an incentive scheme to change that interdepartmental tensions, so we can get that lovely flow in our processes?
That's right. Well, that's a great example, and that's why we discourage business owners from designing incentive plans per department. because a
Mm.
lot of times you can pit departments against each other because they're going to figure out a way to get their bonus, whether it hurts another department or not. They're not thinking about the one company message. They're thinking about themselves, me. And we want
Mm.
them to think about we. So if the incentive plan is designed at the more macro level in the organization, and then we provide the tools and training and teaching for the folks in the different departments to understand, to your example, that process and broken processes throughout the organization are going to create inefficiencies, which is going to pull money out of the incentive plan. If we have to rework, or the sales team didn't fill out all the information correctly, or we shipped the wrong product and the salesperson hasn't gotten paid yet, it's all related,
Yeah.
and so we have to get the employees to start to climb the tree a little higher and see a bigger picture of it's not about me or my department, it's about us and we. And when we can fix those, like document the process or get the right people in the room to discuss the problem and arrive at a solution for how to improve the process, or inject a bit of technology in there, or checklists or whatever it might be, they can start to see that, hey, we're all on the same team here.
Yep.
And I will tell you, it's at its essence, essentially, it's not the incentive plan that's causing the behavioral change. The incentive plan often becomes a celebration for a job well done, for surpassing a goal. And
Yeah.
so there's a sense of like camaraderie and pride of accomplishment that goes beyond the financial side. There's more of an intrinsic win there for the team when and oh yeah, we get some money too. So
Yeah.
we don't want to make it all about the money. The money helps, but it's not going to be life-changing dollars. It's
Mm.
going to be money that that you can put to good use at home, though.
Yeah. And I think like getting your culture right and getting people to buy into things is, we're in a labor crisis at the moment.
Yeah.
And if we get our culture wrong, we're going to continue to hemorrhage labor. And that's one of our most expensive things, is to hire, retrain and get people up to speed. How then would you, hiring the right people then becomes so important.
Yeah.
How do you, if you've got somebody perhaps in your team that's not getting on board, those are difficult conversations. How do we go about then perhaps filtering those out or encouraging them to come on? And how does this sort of scheme perhaps help even peer-to-peer pressure to get things moving?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and there probably not one right answer to that, but I look at leadership and management at the source of that solution. And if we have well-trained leaders or folks that are coming along and nobody's perfect on this, but they understand their role as a leader is really truly a coach for their team, their direct reports. As a coach, we need to spend time with people and help them have a clearer direction, and make sure they have good communication and a good meeting pulse with their direct reports, that the leader has clearly set expectations around behavior, which we call core values. And when you see a direct report that's out of alignment with core values, we need to talk about it immediately. So really coaching them in the moment, and holding them accountable, because you've got this very simple set of expectations around core values, around a simple job description that they can either say, I get this, I want this, I have the capacity to do this job, and am I going to live these core values? I'm going to be in the right seat, and I've got a great boss, and I'm going to be coached along the way. The incentive plan is not going to manage the people, right? And so that was where my sort of my big aha back in 2011 or so, when I'd been doing all that work without having any kind of operating system. And so I was looking for one and found EOS, and we could put that sort of as the locomotive. The first step is get the people side right. Make sure we've got rock stars and superstars and shooting stars, or whatever metaphor you want, first. And when you have 100% of the, as Jim Collins says, right people in the right seats, you've got this great culture of people that you're excited to develop an incentive plan, because they're earning it and they're all in, And so that becomes a very important piece. Those tough conversations that the boss may have to have with a direct report, we've got tools within EOS that they can use. And there are several books that talk about it. I won't go into too much detail on it, but it's having frequent conversations with them and course correcting and giving them some time frames to try to do some things differently. And if they can't turn it over, they can't turn it around, they probably aren't a fit for the culture and they need to work somewhere else. And that's fine. It doesn't make them a bad person, just sort of a square peg in a round hole, perhaps. And then, because ideally we want a culture of folks who really live and breathe the same principles.
Yeah. And it's that old saying, you know, one rotten apple can actually destroy a fruit basket. So it's the same thing. If you've got somebody who is not coming on board with where you're heading, and sometimes people take a little bit of time to turn, but if they're clearly not, then they just don't belong. And a leader shouldn't see that as a failure on their behalf. It's just somebody who's not fitting with where you're wanting to head in the future.
No, that's true. And I've found that if you tolerate misfits for too long, you start to lose your good people. And you also lose credibility because people will say, what's taking you so long? Because we all see the problem. You know, that guy's a jerk or whatever. And so they, you know, it's up to us as leaders to really try to coach it up if possible. And if not, it's got to be coached out. And so we don't lose other folks who are incredibly valuable to the team. And there's a tool called the Performance Values Matrix that I think the famous CEO of GE probably coined or developed. You can Google it, Performance Values Matrix. Essentially, it's a 2x2 model that talks about core values versus performance, and there are 4 quadrants there. And we want to make sure that we're aiming for the upper right quadrant of character and competence, if you will.
Okay. So if you could leave our participants with a few key takeaways from your experience with cultural leadership and developing incentive programs, what would they be?
Well, let's see, probably the first one is the KISS rule. Keep it super simple. And if as you grow your organization, if you're an entrepreneur and you're, you know, I know if it's sleepless nights, I went for the first 6 years without a paycheck, there's a lot of risk and there's a lot of headaches. And the complexity is going to come naturally with growth. You're going to have more people, you're going to have more handoffs, you're going to have more customers, more vendors. That complexity is just a natural part of the evolution and revolution of business. And so control the controllables and keep incredibly simple what you're able to control. And that would include not only your operating system like EOS, but also the incentive plan design. It's important that the design is easy to communicate and easy for people to understand. So that's probably the first one, is to simplify. Always look for ways as a leader to delegate, to let go of the tasks that you really shouldn't be doing. It's not your highest and best use. And often when you let go of that, you find time. I heard an acronym this past week. The word system is save yourself time, energy, money. And I love that because system, you know, the results you're getting are perfect for the system you're using. And if you don't like the results, look at the system, look at the process. And so that's very helpful as well. So those are probably the 2 big ones that come to mind first. I'm an avid reader of books. And so, you know, as you're going along on your entrepreneurial journey, read lots of books and get lots of different ideas from thought leaders. One of my coaches said, don't read everything you believe, and which I thought was very, very clever. You know, read things that make you stop and get curious. And so hopefully that's helpful for you. And I hope what I've talked about here, Carolyn, with everybody has been very helpful too. Appreciate that.
Really fantastic. I think also is probably key is don't be scared to ask for help or ask questions. You know, it's we as leaders, we don't know everything. And sometimes when you get caught in a business, if we've gone through, you know, a bit of rough times, you can get actually so caught up in the business that you forget to take air and actually have a look at that bigger picture and start thinking, is this the direction I really want to be in, and how can we move ourselves forward? You
Yeah,
know, we want to be
absolutely.
thriving, not surviving.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. And getting more proactive and less reactive, right, in
Yeah,
there. So that's
yeah.
great. I
So
appreciate your time.
thanks, Alex. Thanks so very much. If people want to reach out to you, I will drop a link to your
Okay,
to you in the communication, the email, and they can reach out to you
that
for
sounds great. I
some
appreciate it.
further questions and answers. Yeah, cool. Thanks so
Sounds
much,
good.
Alex. It's been a fantastic conversation.
Thank you, Carolyn. Appreciate it. Take care.
Well, wasn't that an incredible interview with Alex Freytag? And I know that you would have got some amazing insights into how to develop a self-funding incentive program. Alex also spoke to us about the clarity of understanding your culture and your purpose and how to convey that to your people. He was also very insightful into ensuring that you understand your numbers and understand what level of profit you need to maintain and grow your business, and where the level is set above that, where you can start sharing some of those profits with your employees and to help how that might impact and change behavior. It's about creating that ownership of the business so people know where they fit within the business and how their behavior and their actions can improve the profitability of your business. But as Alex said, it's an incentive program and it needs to be earned. It's not a bonus system where people become entitled. So please make sure that you drop any questions at all you want into an email for me, and I will include those in our Q&A session on the 7th of July. Also reach out to Alex. I'll put his contact details into your email. And Alex's book, Profit Works, goes into a lot more detail into how to develop your program if you were interested in purchasing his book. Our next speaker is Sean Moon, and Sean has over 30 years of experience in leadership development, culture, and he worked with Franklin Covey as a trainer. So please make sure you click the next link in our email series for the interview with Sean Moon, and I will see you there in a few moments.